Okay, I'd like to call a meeting of the Budget Review Committee to order. It's Wednesday, May 9th, 2018. It's 7 PM and we're in the Aldermatic Chamber. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Alderman at Large Laurie Wilshire. Here. Alderman at Large Brian McCarthy. Alderman at Large Michael O'Brien is present. Alderwoman at Large Shoshana Kelly.
Here.
Alderman at Large David Tenza is absent. Alderman Jan Schmidt
Here.
is present. Also in attendance, in the chair of the committee, Richard Dowd.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Present.
Is present. Also in attendance, Mr. Chair, is Alderman Jettie and Alderman Harriet Gathright.
Okay, very good. Alderman Tenza is out of town on business. This is why he's not here this evening. I think he's going to try and watch online. Okay, so the first order of business is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to speak to the board? Please identify yourself and your address.
Good evening. My name is Doris Hohensee. I'm on 15 Swart Terrace in Nashua. There was no deliberation by the Board of Ed on this school district budget that will be presented to you tonight. The board was elected to provide checks and balances on the administration's budget proposal, yet none of that was done. The majority on our board rejected an opportunity to reconsider their lack of deliberation. They know, for example, that our textbook line item was cut by over $500,000 from last year, leaving only $75,000 this year. They know that many students are using very old and dated textbooks. They know that the school district anticipates a shortfall for fiscal 19 budget with rising out-of-district special ed costs up to $900,000. There are known fiscal errors in the budget. There are fiscal errors in tonight's presentation. As a board member, I wanted to question many of the line items, but was not given the opportunity by the board majority. Last night, the board voted to throw away over $250,000 in staff salaries by waiving the last day of school for teachers and leaving hourly workers, paras, secretaries, food service staff to punch in and out on June 25th to collect their pay. There is no benefit to students or taxpayers with this misuse of $250,000. When do taxpayers get a $250,000 end of the year party? Or maybe a tax refund? Certainly not this year. I'm upset at the prospect of this sort of fiscal irresponsibility continuing for the next 4 years, and I'm terribly, terribly disappointed in the board majority. Thank you.
Is there anyone else that would like to give public comment?
Yes. Good evening. My name is Howard Kaufman. I reside at 6 Gettysburg Drive here in Nashua. My name is Howard Kaufman. I'm currently the Budget Committee Chair for the Board of Education. The Board of Education budget before you tonight was approved by the Board of Ed by a vote of 6-3 on April 9th, 2018. It was passed without any modification from the superintendent's original proposed budget. The proposal before you represents an increase of 3.41% over last year's school district operating budget. The total budget request is approximately $110 million. This amount is approximately 1% over the mayor's budget request for the Board of Ed, which in dollars represents an overage of approximately $900,000. Both proposals are over the spending cap. The Budget Committee spent 8 weeks listening to the budget proposal and only one night deliberating it. At our second deliberative session, we did not discuss the budget. We only voted to approve and recommend it to your body. I would like to point out that 3 opposing votes were cast by members of the board elected in November 2016. That is to say, a majority of those with board and budgetary experience voted against it. All of the members elected in November 2018 and March 2018 voted for the proposal. As budget chair, I would like to say that as a committee of the whole, we did not perform our due diligence, nor did we address several known budget deficiencies, including a $30,000 overage in one of the salary lines, a 10% error in duplication of funds for surveys, a $550,000 undeclared reduction in textbook spending, a lack of transparency regarding undeclared staff relocations, a lack of discussion regarding the opportunity to expand staff in order to generate inbound tuition of approximately $200,000, a lack of funding for $72,000 in elementary school online discovery curriculum. As budget chair, I'm here to report on the committee's action. As a member of the board and as an informed member of the public, I ask you to reject this proposal and approve the mayor's budget request for the Board of Education, which is already over the spending cap. Thank you.
Any other public comment?
Thank you. I hadn't intended to speak, but as president of the board, I think you ought to know that at 3.4, we left needs for the district on the table. We have just signed a contract with our teachers to make sure we're not losing our quality teachers. There are 8 kindergarten paras in the budget that we were told last year that there was really no cost in adding all-day kindergarten. It was a wash, but we are understaffed with paraprofessionals, not only in kindergarten, but probably throughout the whole district. We have 2 ELL teachers in the budget. 4 were asked for. They are needed. Our population in ELL has grown tremendously. We have 1 psychologist. We probably could use 4. That's the reality of the students we're dealing with, the issues they come with. The opioid crisis has created a lot of needs with our students. So this budget, I was one of the ones who voted to send it down at 3.4, only because I think we really could have used 6.4. There have been lots of years where it's been 1.8, 1.9, and we can only do that for so long. We are running on fumes in some of our programs, and we need to start making up for what we've done in the past. So I ask you to look closely at the budget we've sent down. It wasn't that we did not take the time to make reductions. My feeling was we didn't have room to make reductions. They were all needs. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none. Communications?
There is none.
Unfinished business resolutions?
Mr. Chairman, we have before us R 18019, relative to the adoption of the fiscal year 2019 proposed budget for the City of Nashua General Enterprise and Special Revenue Funds. A public hearing is scheduled for 5/17/18 at 7 p.m. at Nashua High School North Auditorium.
Okay, so we have before us our 18019. This evening, we're going to be covering the last division, which is Education, Department 191. Revenue is on page 56. Appropriations are on page 250. Before going on, just want to say that the mayor's budget is what we have been provided for the Budget Committee. It would take a majority vote of this committee to bring forth anything in addition to what the mayor has proposed. And then it would require 10 votes at the full board level to add it to the mayor's budget. When it's approved at the full board level, it will go to the mayor. The mayor can always veto it and send it back to us. That's a possibility, but I don't see it happening. 17th, we'll have a public hearing, and we will have all the division directors there to answer questions of the public, and we'll be at Nashua High North. And the process is, as I said, we have the mayor's budget in front of us, which is a 2.5% increase for the schools from last year. We will be discussing that this evening. I don't anticipate we'll be making any motions this evening. We're going to have the public hearing the 17th, and then we have wrap-up sessions, in which case we will be addressing questions, concerns, and motions from the Budget Committee. When the Budget Committee passes the budget, either as is or amended, then again, it'll be brought to the full board. We hope to have this all completed by late May, early June. The other thing is that once the budget is signed by the mayor and approved, the monies that have been allocated to the school department will be, after the 1st of July, will go to the, Mr. Donovan there to, and then the Board of Education will at that time make up their mind where the funds will be spent. We cannot, at the Board of Aldermen level, make specific changes to the school department. If we do anything, it's at the bottom line. In the past, there have been motions, but the Board of Ed is not required to follow any of those directly. So it's a bottom line thing. You get a budget, and then it's yours to allocate. Okay, with that, I would like to ask the president of the board and the superintendent to come up, and anyone else that you want to just find an empty chair. Mr. Donovan, certainly. Who's going to run the?
I can do it.
Welcome, Mr. Mosley, Dr. Mosley, rather, and I think this is your first budget run through, so
In Nashua?
it's not, nobody here bites, so
It's not hard.
we just want to hear your presentation, what you have to tell us.
First of all, good evening, everyone, and good evening to the public. Thank you for having us here. What I'd like to do is to run through the budget and to certainly talk to you a little bit about the needs of our schools. I think it's important to understand that I'm going to talk through some slides, and it's going to give you a snapshot of what's going on in the schools. We don't take this process lightly. We have a story to tell. Whatever you decide to do with this budget, we respect that. But we're not here for personal statements. We're not here because I need something. We're here for the kids of Nashua. And I don't want that focus to be lost. So this is a snapshot of our accomplishments in Nashua, particularly around our dropout rate and our what we are very proud of. We offer a wide array of classrooms, offerings for our students, AP classes, our CTE programs, and we're very, very proud of those programs. To give you a sense of where we're at a little bit, our enrollment is about 11,000 plus. And that is something where we anticipate it to continue to probably stay a little steady. We're looking at some enrollment numbers right now. We can talk a little bit about kindergarten a little later, but certainly our enrollment numbers continue to be fairly up around 11,000 students. Most of our students are concentrated at the elementary school. We have, our kindergarten enrollment is certainly contributing to our increase in our student population, and that's certainly something that we're very proud of. So part of what I really wanted to want the aldermen to really look at is certainly we have about 41% of our students are free and reduced lunch. Our ELL population, and I really want to highlight that because that's what President Ms. Oden was talking about, that our ELL population is growing. It's at about 12%. Our special education student population is at 17%. Our out-of-district placements continue to grow as the needs of our kids continue to expand. And our transportation costs continue to grow as well because of our contracts and as well as transporting our kids. And so this gives you a snapshot of some of the things that are where our enrollment fits in. One of the things that I think is very important is, and again, I want to have the alderman just take a look at this brief slide. This slide is a snapshot of our student enrollment and our demographics in terms of this year. And I just want us to take a look at this and walk through this a little bit. Asian American, you have at about 10%. Our African American population is about 7%. Native American is about 5%. Our Pacific Islander is about 2%. Our white students who identify as being white is at 58%. And our Hispanic students are at or about, God bless you. Thank you. At about 24%. If I can just, I wanted to just have our alderman just take a look at this form here. And one of the things when I looked at this particular slide, I said, where was Nashua 10 years ago? Where were you 10 years ago? And so the public, they can't see this, but I just want to read the numbers. In 2008, you had a Asian Pacific population at about 6%. This year, you're at 9%. The African American population continues to stay steady. But look at your Hispanic population in the city of Nashua. 10 years ago, you were at 14%. This year, you're at 25%. Your Native American population, that is, relatively not that change. But look at what people have identified as being white. The white population at that time, 10 years ago, was at 74%. And at this year, it's at 58%. And finally, I thought this would be very, very interesting. Look at your multiracial demographics. 10 years ago, you had not one family in Nashua that identified as being multiracial. Look at it now, you're at 3%. And so this budget is based, and where I'm going with this in terms of the conversation, is that this budget really talks about how the changing demographics of Nashua need to reflect this budget. You have more, what I say, Browning in Nashua than you ever have before. You have more ELL students and more families migrating into this city, the gateway city, than you had 10 years ago. And that's why you're seeing this difference. And that's something that we should be proud of and embrace. Your teacher, here's a snapshot of faculty in the district, how many faculty members you have, and the services that we provide with the faculty. About 1,000 faculty you have here. You have about 400 paraprofessionals, about 65 administrators, about 80 secretaries, 66 non-union affiliated staff, food service, 96 faculty. So, we have certainly the supports to continue moving the district forward. This slide is basically an overview of kind of a snapshot of what I would consider the roles and responsibility within our district. You have the school board responsible for the governance, particularly around policy development, organization evaluating the effectiveness of academic outcomes. You have the superintendent, myself, leads all district and school staff and students, identification of recommended needs, academic, financial, and that's kind of the role that I see myself. So part of what I did when we did our district overview for the city is we really looked at what are certain things we wanted to do. Number one, we wanted to develop a strategic plan. We're in the process of doing that. Renew commitment to effective board governance and governance within the school. Fully comprehend implementation of full-day kindergarten. We'll get to that in a second later on in this presentation. Accelerate our curriculum development and professional development district-wide. I believe that we can get better at implementing district-wide professional development that's consistent throughout the district. I also think that we could spend more time really collaborating and certainly what we call articulating our assessments from grade to grade and from class to class and from building to building. Part of what I want to do, and I don't want to read every slide, but I wanted to go with this slide is that we want to build a legacy here in the Nashua Public Schools. We don't want to look at our schools 10 years from now or 5 years from now. What does our legacy look like for our kids? More importantly, we want to make sure that our families that are interested in coming to our schools or thinking about Nashua know what we do. And we have excellence in education. We have integrity. We have a vision of thinking. And I say vision of thinking, visionary thinking. Visionary thinking, in my mind, it's not about, about teaching kids the right answer. It's about teaching kids how to write, how to ask the right questions, and to think and act in an innovative way in critical thinking. Prudence and investment in budgeting. We want it all. We'd love to have it all. But in this 3.4 budget, we really prioritize what we believe is essential for our schools. We prioritize what is best for our students and not for our personal needs. We prioritize in terms of what is the best way to move our district forward. Inclusiveness. That's very important for us because we want to make sure that we provide an educational environment for our special education students, our 504 students. Our students are in ELL. Our parents know that they can come to our schools, whether you speak another language, whether you are fluent in multi-languages. Nashua is your home. That's important to us. More around our budget development. There was some early discussion around this budget development process. From my perspective, this is not something that was done in a vacuum. This was something done where we sat down very early with our coordinators. We sat down with our principals. We sat down with our directors. We had intimate conversations about what was very important to us, what was important to our schools, what was important to our kids. We prioritized and really sacrificed at times because each department wants their own thing. We get it. Each principal wants more staff. Get it. I would love to have more support at central office. I think the board gets it. But the challenge is, how do we sacrifice and push the needs of we and not me for the betterment of our kids' future? And so when we started to think about what are the tenets, what are the essential points of our budget, what are some of the things that are very important to us? How do we want to capture this? And I always have this way of presenting. When I look at PowerPoint presentation, I always say, make sure it doesn't read like War and Peace. Make sure it captures where you want to go. And keep it brief, Jamal, because no one wants to hear you talk too much. So, attract and retain educators. That was important to us. And Madam President Odom spoke to that in her presentation when we talked about retaining our teachers. Our contracts, and I want to be very clear about our contracts, and I want to clear up any misnomers, and I want to say it to the public. We didn't give the teachers anything. We didn't give them a contract. They earned this contract. They are by far the backbone of our schools, and they earned this contract. And I want to be clear, and I thank the committee for approving it. I thank the board for approving it, but we still have a long way to go with our contracts. Despite what people may say or something, our teachers still need to be paid more for what they do. We're not keeping track or keeping up with the competition, and that has caused many of our teachers to leave, and we've had challenges retaining our most talented teachers in our district. And this is important, and I want people to understand where I'm going with this. It's important because what's happening and what has been happening in our district is that we get brand new talented teachers coming in. They come in, they get their training for 5 years, they get all the professional development that they can, they work with our kids, they get that hands-on experience, and then another school district snaps them, picks them right up, takes that human capital away from us, and now we're back at square one. So someone else out there is actually benefited from our investment in our teachers. Accommodating increasing number of ELL, we'll certainly get to that. I know you've seen that in your packet, but by far, this district has done a disservice to these kids. And I'm not blaming anyone, and I'm not saying it's anyone's fault. I had the opportunity to go to the mayor's cultural connection, where I had an opportunity to speak with ELL kids, had an opportunity to speak with ELL parents. They're not coming here to advocate for their kids. They're not, and I don't say that to be mean, but it takes so much to get here. And more importantly, our ELL families are scared. Our ELL families, some of them are suffering from trauma from the hurricane. Some of them are saying, can you reach out to me at the school? Can you help me? Can you help us get a driver's license? So I don't have an ELL kid. I don't have an ELL parent. But because I don't have that is why I'm advocating. We need ELL teachers yesterday. And even if you approve the 3 ELL teachers beyond the request of this, I can guarantee you I'm coming back here because I need a lot more ELL. They need us, and they need advocates to really support this budget. An increase in kindergarten paraprofessionals. This isn't criticism, but we need more paras. We needed more paras when I started off in June. With that said, the para support that we have is inconsistent throughout all our buildings. This attempts to, this increase will give us about, I'd say, a 0.5 for all of our paras, for a 0.5 coverage for all of our kindergarten classrooms and in our classrooms in Nashua. I skipped one, reduction in staff. I'm going to say some things, and I want to be very clear what's been happening at the board, and with the support of this budget, you're actually going to stop something this year. You're going to stop the Hunger Games. You're going to stop faculty being so concerned that when they're watching these board meetings, that their job is going to be cut. That makes the faculty upset because they don't know where the cuts are coming. They don't know if it's, one particular board meeting, a Spanish teacher, making this up. Don't get nervous, Spanish teachers, if you're watching this at the North, and all of a sudden they're watching the board meeting and they look up and they see, I make a motion to cut 4 Spanish teachers, and then you get the Spanish teachers riled up and they come down to the board meeting and they say, don't do that. And then all of a sudden we find a way to make sure that Spanish teachers are not going to be cut. And then, it's something else. And Madam President spoke to that. Because this budget has been tweaked 1.7, 1.3, we all know to roll a budget like this, it costs, 2.5 and some. So we want to stop that Hunger Game, and we actually want to start having people predict that they're going to have jobs and they're not applying to other places that are taking away our human capital. Restore our custodial positions. We've proposed 3 positions. There's some discussion around privatization. Our current board does not support that. Finally, I'll say this publicly, and I think we all know this. I am the 3rd superintendent in 3 years in this district. There have been 9 different assistant superintendents in this district. It's been chaos. I'm trying. I need your help to bring some type of stability to this district. It's incredible. And you've had teachers, you've had principals. They don't even know. When I first started, they're giving me the look like, how long are you going to be here? That feeling needs to stop. And that's what this budget attempts to address. So we don't take it lightly at the 3.4 increase. Our last year budget was about $106 million and some change. This year we're proposing $110 million in increase. I will talk more a little bit about where those numbers fit in. Is this you, Dan? Okay. I'm going to turn over to Dan.
Okay, Dr. Mosley mentioned, just so everyone's aware, the 106, 110 million, that's the amount that the Board of Ed approves. The amount in your book is larger because that includes benefits. Benefits are added by the city. So your number is 145 or so when you look in the book. That's basically what the difference is. So the 3.4 is an increase in what the Board of Ed approved, not necessarily. If there's an increase in benefits, that comes through the city part of the equation. And basically then when I present this budget, I typically say, okay, how much of our budget is salary and salary type lines and how much is everything else? And it typically runs 80 to 20. This shows you, if you did the math, it's actually 79%, pretty close to 80. So basically 79% of our costs are salary related. And the number there, the 3.29% increase, what that's telling you is 79% of the budget, i.e. the salary budget, is up 3.29%. Okay. The next one is so any account that isn't salary related, I just lump together and call it non-labor, that's 21% of the budget. That piece of the budget this month, so 21%, is up 3.87%. And we'll get into a little more detail on that later.
Somebody get the clicker to go along with the slides.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah,
I was,
you're falling asleep over there.
I'm sorry.
Keep going.
I'm kidding, I wasn't. All right, where are you, Dana?
Going.
Okay.
Right here. Okay, we sort of broke the increases out into different categories. This is a list of the significant costs that are related to increasing costs at current level of service. So if we're going to provide, if you go to a smaller town, they have a default budget. These are the kind of things you would see in that. Where are the increases just to keep doing what we're doing now? There's $265,000 increase, and that's due to the bus contract. This is the second last year of the bus contract. We signed a 5-year bus contract. This year and next year, it's 4.5% increases. Brentwood rent. Brentwood is an out-of-district program within the city of Nashua. We're trying to save money instead of sending them to these outside schools that can run up to $100,000, but typically they're around $70,000 to $75,000. We're doing it internally. That building is currently up in Merrimack, New Hampshire. We want to move that building back to Nashua. It's become a Nashua school. It's been around about 4 years now, so I think it's time to bring it back to Nashua. To do that, it's going to cost about $25,000 more on the rent line. Out-of-district tuition, I could talk about this all night. This is an increase in $200,000, which brings our total in that line to about $4.9 million. We expect to spend this year at least 5.5 or 5.6 million. So even adding 200,000, we don't even have what we're going to spend this year in that budget. Plant operations equipment, I'm pretty strict with Mr. Smith, and I said, you can't just get new equipment because the stuff is old. This amount is items that are actually broken, that they're not working anymore. So we really need some money to just keep the machines running, so to speak. I'll skip over the 4,000 line. It's not significant. Special education summer costs, 58,000. That's the amount we put in the fiscal year 19 budget. It is the amount we spent. We need to add to what we had in last year's budget. That's what we spent last summer, in the summer of 17. And the high school counselor, a couple of years ago, the Board of Education approved a counselor, and they did it very, very late in the year, and it was 50,000 was used. They weren't able to find a counselor, A, in that short amount of time, and B, for that price. So what they ended up doing was they worked with, I believe it's the youth council in town, I'm not sure, but one of the agencies in town. We sort of subcontract with them. What happened last year was it was kept out of the budget because there was no person in the role. So we've been using the supply lines for the high schools. Each one's paying $25,000. So really what I'd like to do there is just take that out of the supply lines, give those supply monies back to the high schools and put it in the right place. So that's what that is. Next slide, please. Then we talked about another thing, cost shifting to the operating budget. So once again, we're going to talk about transportation. 2 of the buses that we've been using for the last few years has been in a program. It's part of the Title I grant. That's a federal grant that we get, and it was school choice. So certain students could decide to go to a different school. We had a whole process in place. That program is now over. So what we were charging to the grant, which was the 2 buses, 169, actually it's 3 buses, I believe, but it's 169,000. That now has to go to the operating budget because we still need the buses. We weren't just using those buses for this program. They were just part of the whole network that we were using. Do you want me to keep going, or are you going to take this one?
I'll take it. You want to talk about the custodians, and I'll take it from the communications director. Governance?
Sure. This budget, last year, we reduced the number of custodians by 9. There were 9 actual custodians that were reduced. So we've been getting through this year without that many, but we would like to. We've seen a little reduction in cleaning over the time, so we'd like to bring back 3 of them in this budget. The next item, I think we can skip over. I'm hoping that due to some negotiations currently going on, we may not have to add that line item. So we may be able to save at least 17,000 from the 3.41. The sports revenue, as you probably know, we have a sort of, I know the athletic director doesn't like me calling this, but sort of the pay to play. So if you're not a free and reduced lunch student and you want to play an athletic, a varsity sport at the high school, you have to pay a certain amount. It runs between $50 up to about $450. That's really for hockey. Most are between $50 and $200. So each student's required to pay that. We had put together estimates because those funds are used to reduce our operating budget. The last 2 years, we've been $9,000 short, so this is just sort of bring it into line with what it's going to be. Okay.
And then part of what I just jump in is that we have, over the years, our communication director position has been reduced due to budget considerations. And as superintendent, you can only imagine the amount of communication that comes and requests in and out of my office. It's a challenge, and I think we can do better at it. I don't have that person to really, and when you're sending out a message to over 22,000 people, I say that, 11,000 students times 2 with kids and, probably over 30,000 people. You have to run it through so many different filters because the word and the and shall and will can mean so many different meanings for our families. The second thing that I want to say is that this position, I think I know we can do better because I'm sending out communication in just one language. And again, that speaks to our ELL kids. Our ELL families and our Spanish families, but I'll use a great example, don't get our communication in their native language, and they should. I say I pick because I try, and some of you, are you guys familiar with snow days around here in Nashua? All right. Okay, there's some guy who's like reading profusely off of a Spanish list, who's trying to get the pronunciation right. That's me, because I'm trying to connect with our families. And thank you, Rosie, my administrative assistant, for helping me do this. She's sitting there beside me, helping me pronounce this, every Spanish word. I'm not going to say anything in Spanish tonight because I don't want to embarrass myself. But that communication is not good enough for a city like Nashua. It has to get better. And we can do it. And we should be communicating to our families in Spanish when we send things out. And we should be communicating to them in all of their native languages and I use the word inclusiveness to go back to the tenets of our inclusiveness in our that previous bullet point. There was some discussion around board governance when I first started. We did have some representatives from the New Hampshire School Board Association come down and speak with us. That's a discussion at the board level. That was just something in the budget that's more of a placeholder. I will defer to the board at a later date in terms of where they want to take that. Assistant Director of Human Resources. This request is not negative or not. It's not negative. It's not directed to Dana O'Gara, our current Director of Human Resources, in a negative way. It is our Human Resource Department has experienced some cuts. The sheer volume of requests and the details of these requests are a challenge. And in this particular department, I don't take it lightly, but we need some help. I've mentioned our ELL teachers. I've mentioned our ELL population. This past year, we've had some catastrophes take place in places outside the United States. In Puerto Rico, there was hurricanes there that displaced many families, and those families found their way to Manchester and in Nashua. These are kids that need us the most. I shared with you, I met many of the families during the mayor's cultural connection, and it made me more convinced and resolved that this minor request of ELL teachers, just two, we can certainly use a lot more. And I believe that this is by far a good step in the right direction. When you're transitioning to a place like New Hampshire, it can be a challenge, and you move from a place like Puerto Rico or other regions, you need that support. And I believe strongly that our kids, and I guess I want to say, and I want to move away from ELL kids. These are not ELL kids. These are Nashua kids. They need us. I spoke earlier about the paraprofessional positions at the kindergarten. We need to make sure that there's equity throughout the entire district around our full-day kindergarten. And right now, there's not, and that's no one's fault. This budget addresses that, so there's a 0.5 coverage for our ELL population. School psychologist, grant writer, excuse me. This position is long overdue. A city like Nashua should be very competitive in grants for a variety of reasons. Our demographics, what we offer as a city, many of these grants are out there. And what I mean by a grant writer has a very specific skill. They understand the language, the vernacular of writing a federal grant. And we are not competitive as a school district because we don't have someone devoted to this position. I put up there, I say, and I want to be clear to everyone in the room, I say ish, because a position like that, even if you made it at $50,000, a grant writer, a talented grant writer can bring in a city like this double hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I've seen a grant writer in many other communities that are very similar to Nashua bring in millions of dollars over a course of time. So that investment in a grant writer is invaluable. Part of what's happening in our schools, and we look at school psychologists and we say, well, how many special education students that our school psychologists are servicing and responding to? And my response is that yes, they service special education students, but they're also servicing students who are unidentified. They also service students that are on 504 plans. They also service students that are 504 plan, but more importantly, students that are struggling social emotionally, kids that are not identified, kids that have experienced some type of trauma in their lives, and I include our Nashua ELL students as well. These individuals are the first ones on the front lines to do the assessment, to direct them to the right resources, both in our schools and in our community as well.
Okay, and the non-personnel additional items, it's just a $12,000 for sort of our electrical and plumbing supplies for our plant operations. Keep in mind, we have 18 buildings. And for those of you aware of the construction costs these days have risen significantly, so we put another $12,000 in the budget just to cover same amount of supplies. They're just more expensive these days. And this is just a quick summary of sort of how we broke it out. So there's 639,000, excuse me, which is just increasing costs at current levels of service. The 169 cost shifting to the operating budget. So both of those items, that's an increase in the budget, but it's really not an increase in any of the specific services. Restoring prior reductions is 161,000 of the budget. 364 are additional or / new one services, and then the additional non-personnel is 12,000.
So I'll leave you with just these final thoughts. Tonight, we're not, and I want to be very clear, I'm not here to advocate for this budget at all. I'm actually not. I'm not here to advocate for more money. I'm actually not here to do that. I'm a taxpayer as well, and I understand what a 3.4 increase feels like in a city like this. But I need some help. I need some help with our budget. I need some help moving the school forward. And tonight I'm here to ask for your help. help in providing services for our most needy kids, help in changing that narrative for many of those kids that need us the most. So tonight, I just need some help. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Alderman Jettie.
So, you don't have to convince me of how important it is for Nashua to have good schools. I think it's, it's one of the things that when I campaign for election, that I emphasize that's part of making this city a good city to live in. And I think that the most important part of having good schools is having good teachers. I've heard of the problem in retaining good teachers, and I've heard what you've said about how in order to keep good teachers, we have to pay them appropriately. And you've just we've just negotiated a contract with the teachers. And if I saw the slides correctly, that represents 79 to 80% of your budget is for salary, or is that, and that represents a 3.29% increase. So am I understanding that is it 3.4 that your request is for? 3.4% increase? So 3.29% of that is for the contracts that we've recently negotiated with the teachers? Am I understanding that correctly?
Well, that would be all the labor accounts is the 3.29 versus where we were last year. So not just teachers, it's other groups. And it would be any other line items such as stipends or longevity or those sort of labor costs. So that it's a total of all those. Most of the dollar amount, though, is in fact salaries. And the teachers are approximately 58% of the budget, salary budget, base salary budget.
So, may I?
Continue, yes.
So am I understanding this correctly, that if you're asking for 3.4% and 3.29% is, represents what the new contracts that have been negotiated, there isn't much more of that 3.4% that you're stuck with the 3.9%, aren't you?
No, that's really not the case. The 3.4 is the total increase of the operating budget. 80% of the budget is up 3.29, or 79% of it's up 3.29. Okay, so it's not, 3.29 is not comparable to, it's 80% of the 3.41. So the salary budget is not 3.29. When you look at it as a total percentage, it would be down in about 2.5.
Okay, so would it
Continue.
would it be more accurate for me to say that the 2.5% is a result of the negotiated contracts, and so that's where you're starting,
Yes.
and so if we gave you what the mayor is recommending, you would have to cut elsewhere to come up with a level budget. Is that true or not?
Fairly true, yes. We would have to cut the new items that we put in. This budget has, as you saw, some new items, so you just say, okay, if we're not gonna, I mean, you really gotta look at it. We're not gonna cut anything, we're adding salaries, and then we want to add some other items. So that would be at 2.5%. You can't do all three of those things. You're going to have to reduce something somewhere.
So isn't it true that a 2.5% increase will just cover the negotiated contracts for
Well,
salaries?
they're not all negotiated. The teachers is negotiated. There's about 3 or 4 other contracts that are going into negotiation, so there are reserves set aside for those. They're not locked in place yet because we're in just beginning negotiations.
So may I
Oh,
continue?
Continue?
So the problem I have is that I read that that Nashua's spending per pupil is less than the state average. In fact, I think if I remember what I read correctly, we're kind of down at the lower end of the state, the rankings of per pupil costs. Is that true?
We're in the bottom 25% or so. I don't know exactly where we are. We're certainly in the bottom. Part of that can be explained through volume. You have more students. Most of the the larger cities and towns have lower numbers because you're taking a set of costs. If you have a school building and you have 40 kids in it versus a school building and 80 kids, it's going to be cheaper in the 80 kid, just because you're dividing it by a bigger number. So some of that number is from that. I'm not suggesting all of it, but some of it.
Okay, so that explains, it's not that we're that cheap.
Exactly. It's not as bad as it looks,
Right.
but, I mean, you can compare it to places like Concord and Portsmouth. We're well below them, and we're not that much larger than them. We're certainly larger.
So the quandary that I have is that I'm also sensitive to the taxpayer's ability to pay the bill because the federal government is providing less money to us. The state government is providing less money. There's more and more expense that's being pushed down to the city, not only for school funding, but for roads and everything else that we do in the city. So that push down from the higher levels of government, which I'd like to point out have more sources of income than we do. Our only source of income is the property tax. So that puts us in a position where our property taxpayers are bearing the burden of trying to keep up with all of these federal and state government reduction in the taxes that they raise and the money that they're providing us. So it's that's a quandary which I'm sure you appreciate. I would love to to support your budget completely and even add to it if I could, but I've got to think about the taxpayers, and I'm not sure how that's all going to work out, but I appreciate the work that you're doing, and I appreciate your coming and presenting to us. We'll do the best we can.
Thank you. Alderman McCarthy?
Yeah, I really want to make our schools as good as they can, but I think there's a couple of numbers we have to look at this year. If those of you with budget books turn to page 18, at the bottom, the overall numbers for the general fund, which have gone from 259,293,000 last year to 262,656,000 in the submitted budget this year, which is a $3.36 million increase. If you look a little further up on the school budget, which is the one that's encumbered with the benefits, that number goes from 141 to 146,672, which is a $5,063,000 increase. The school department in the budget this year gets not only the entire $3 million increase in the budget, but gets an additional $1.7 million that we're taking from other departments. All the other spending goes down just to get the budget the mayor submitted. We don't do things like, we don't give the fire department the extra dispatcher they need. We don't put more cops on the street. We don't enhance building inspections. We don't do any of the other things that we want to do. And the reason we're doing that is that the state forced revaluation is going to shift a tremendous piece of the tax burden from the commercial taxpayers to the residential taxpayers. There are properties that are going to have real sticker shock when this year's tax bills hit, unless we're very, very careful about that. So while I'm really sensitive to improving the quality of the schools, I'm also sensitive to making sure that people who live here can continue to live here with the tax increases on a yearly basis. And I just don't, until we see what that actual impact is, I don't see how we can make much difference from, we're going to struggle to get done what the mayor has proposed, let alone increase any other items in the budget.
Okay. Just a couple numbers I want to just throw out real quickly. The cost per student in Nashua is $13,200. And the percentages can be a little tricky, but the mayor reduced the budget requested by the school department by $975,403. So we only work on the bottom line with the school department, so specific things would be hard to earmark. Alderman McCarthy.
Yeah, I just want to point out one thing about the numbers I just gave you. I use the numbers that are loaded with the benefits because the benefits cost is something we have to pay for. The lion's share of the downshifted money from the state pension plan is in that line item. And it's, if you simply look at salary budgets in the school department and salary budgets in the rest of the departments, the school department is paying it has the biggest effect because of the pension plan. And I don't know what, that problem has to be solved 30 miles up the road.
Another item, based on the percentages that you gave us, there's approximately 4,583 students in Nashua getting free and reduced lunch. That's a pretty telling number. So, any other questions from the board? Alderwoman Kelly.
So I had a question in terms of the additional resources you're asking. I know you said that the benefits are without or outside of your budget. So would that have implications on the budget that we see in front of us with the benefits?
Mr. Donovan?
Not sure I understand the
I
question.
think what she's asking is, you have monies in here for salaries to add staff in your budget. Does that also cost an increase in other parts of the city budget through benefits and?
Yes,
Thanks for the
I
clarification.
think that's the question.
That's exactly what my question was. Thank you.
that would, yes.
Okay.
Follow up, or you're all set?
I mean, my follow-up would be, do we have any idea what it is for somebody perhaps at like a 60,000, like can we figure out what that would be?
Alderman McCarthy?
I would use a round number of about 30% of the increase in salary budget
Okay,
for a
thank you.
pension plan.
Yeah.
Healthcare is a little more.
35 probably.
35? Okay, thank you.
Other
And
questions?
that is not proposed, those increases are not proposed anywhere in the budget at the moment.
So they'd have to be addressed. Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Follow up on a little bit of Alderman Jettie and Alderman McCarthy. The wizards that live in the north up in Concord there, the House defeated Senate Bill 193. But it has been morphed into an amendment that's going to come before the House tomorrow. I would say it's a non-germane, but they're allowing it to go through. Now, if that school voucher program does get approved by the House, and I don't know in this newly amended bill when the effective date is gonna be. But if we are faced through another rollback from the state that comes down to the voucher program, whose budget is that gonna come out of?
Mr. Donovan?
Well, my understanding is that that'll come out of our revenue budget, because it would reduce our adequacy aid that we receive from the state, which is about $35 million. So that number would be, I believe the funds would be part of that whole equation.
Follow up?
Follow up, Alderman O'Brien?
So if I assume, if it comes out of what the budget that may be approved by this budget committee and through the full board, if it's unanticipated, and depending upon the start date, that will really hurt existing students if it has to come out of the budget that was approved, am I correct?
Alderman McCarthy, I can.
It doesn't show up in the budget anywhere. What happens is when we submit the MS1 form in September to get the tax rate set, we put the numbers from the budget in there. The state then goes through and looks at what the adequacy number will be that is collected from Nashua and is given back to Nashua and calculates as part of the difference what that is. That's then netted out of the budget appropriations to figure out what has to be raised by taxes. Where you'll see it is that number to be raised by taxes will go up by about $2 million, which will change the tax rate by whatever the equivalent number of cents is for that, which is probably in the half a buck range. And, you know, that means every person who owns a $300,000 house will pay another $150 just for that.
Thank the board president for his explanation, thank you.
Question I have is, we have 256 students homeschooled in Nashua, according to your numbers, which seems a lot higher than it used to be. Do we get adequacy money for those students?
No.
Interesting. Okay, other questions? Let's see. See if I had any others. I think, well, I think I'm pretty well good. Alderman Kelly.
Yeah, I'm actually really grateful that we're gonna have full-day kindergarten in the district. I want to know, I know you were asking for additional para educators, but do you have a sense of how that affected your budget for this year?
Yeah, that was an increase to get an average of half a para in a kindergarten. So for example, if a school has 2 kindergartens, there'd be 1 para that would move between the 2. It's about $125,000, right?
Yeah, so how about
For the 8 of them.
approximately $125,000 for that?
So that's the
That's
number.
the base pay. Going back to your other question, that would be a little more for benefits, yes.
So that's in addition to what your other budget is. So I'm wondering, like, in general, what were the other costs that came with the full-day kindergarten, and how did that affect your budget? Does that make sense?
This is pretty much the only additional
Okay.
cost. Last year, we rolled out full-day kindergarten. This year, we didn't add anything into the budget for it. It may have ended up maybe costing us 1 more teacher, as it turned out, but we dealt with that within the existing budget. This is then to bring, now that we've run it for a year and we found out that if you've got 3 classes and only have 1 para, it's probably not enough for a bunch of 5-year-olds.
And just clarification, because anytime you start something new, you don't really know what's going to happen on the other end of that. And certainly, you know, when this became available to our parents, instead of paying for it, they started to enroll in it. This also is predicated on the housing availability. We have new families as the population in New Hampshire in general starts to age. We have new families moving into our city, and so they are taking advantage of the full-day kindergarten, and so that in itself has said, okay, as we see the enrollments go up and they start to be attracted to it, the school has to make an adjustment on that. So that's why we've made that request. And we would really like to say throughout all of our full-day kindergarten classrooms, there's a 0.5 paraprofessional assigned to that classroom. So that brings some consistency throughout the city for our schools.
Thank you.
Alderman O'Brien? Wait, you all set?
I just said thank you.
Alderman O'Brien?
Yes, if I may ask the doctor, in this anticipated budget, do we have any future negotiations you see on the horizons that are timely coming up for renegotiation under this budget?
So currently, right now, what we have in the let's say pipeline, we have our secretaries, we have our food service, we have our directors, and we have the principal contracts. So just on this year, believe it or not, all the contracts are kind of expiring, and custodians, the custodians as well. So the answer to your question is and Dan, we'll look at you. We've already had some placeholders for these negotiations, so there will be an impact on that. So there are limitations on what that number looks like in terms of salary and increases for those collective bargaining units we're currently engaged in right now for negotiations.
Follow-up, if I may. But this board did approve a teacher's contract, and I would kind of hope, did that not kind of help stop the bleeding of losing talented teachers? And we're heading in the right direction as far as that goes. Am I correct?
I think it's helpful. Well, yes, it's helpful.
All set? Alderman McCarthy?
Yeah, I have a kind of long-term question that's related to some of the budget strains. Dr. Mosley, in your remarks at the beginning, you pointed out that we're changing from teaching students everything about history and getting them to regurgitate it to teaching them how to ask the right questions and how to do critical thinking. But I'm actually pretty certain that we still teach everybody about the Battle of Thermopylae at some point during their school career. Do we have an opportunity to use technology to do some of the teaching of subjects of that sort? And I think math lends itself well, other schools, and I don't want people jumping down my throat and saying I'm trying to automate the school system, because I'm not. 'Cause I think there's no substitute for one-on-one interactions, but there are a lot of kids who can learn things through technology, and in fact, do that a lot on their own. Is there a way that we can optimize use of technology for that so that our resources in the classroom are freed up to deal with the problems that we're not addressing?
That's a very good question. And so I think it's important that the students know about the Battle of Thermopylae. I think it's important the students know that it was a very small passage for the battle. They should also know that it was a very small passage that the Spartans defended. I think it's important for them to know that. I think they should know that the Spartans and the Athenians were in collaboration to make sure that the unknown soldiers, I think it was.
300.
You're right. That was the movie, but this was a battle. The Persians, was it the Persians?
The Persians.
Yeah. So I think all of those are relevant. We do have online opportunities for our kids, and there's some positive things about that, and there's some negative things. The positive things is that if certainly for our students who want to take online learning, it provides them opportunities to access curriculum and experiences that enhance and sometimes complement their regular schedules. To substitute, that would be something that, you can't beat what we're doing right now. And sometimes I do worry about our kids because we're so digitized that having a face-to-face conversation, making eye contact, actually the appearance, I shouldn't say the appearance, there's a difference between hearing someone and listening to someone. And as we start to move away from what we're doing here to literally having a computer on our phones, I would say that I do worry about our kids having what I call that experience. With that said, we also have to recognize that there are opportunities for that. There are opportunities for kids to get credits in the form of an online credit recovery. We do have opportunities for our kids to do that. And some of our kids have opportunities to take online courses at the post-secondary level as well. So I would say that if, to answer your question, Alderman McCarthy, I believe that students should have a blended effect. You know, we have students at the high school level who are going to be taking trips. And I only know this because my own daughter is currently planning to take this trip to sometime in 2 years that they're going to take a trip abroad. And one of the things they're going to go to is Normandy. They're going to go to the beaches of Normandy. And I don't think that any computer program or anything like that can substitute that experience. Some of our kids travel on the Washington, D.C. This has nothing to do with politics or nothing like that, but every student should visit the Lincoln Memorial. Every student should know where the White House is. Every student should have the experience of the Vietnam War, the Korean War. Every student should have the experience of you know, there's a new African American museum down there. That's just wonderful. Every student should know where Martin Luther King made his speech, "I Have a Dream." So my response is it's a blended approach. And if there's opportunities to engage students in a way that they can use technology and have a traditional experience, then we try to do that.
All set? Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. My question would be to the doctor, if we can't have a regular teacher in the classroom, the second most important person that's got to come in is going to be hired as a substitute teacher to come in. And I did nicely fill that position for 7 years and loved the experience, loved working with the kids. And can you just give us, I didn't see anything per se, you know, I didn't pour over it 100%, but in your presentation, I didn't see anything on the substitutes. Yeah. So my question directly would be, we're getting good, adequate people still coming in to teaching our kids and stuff like that, and in an overview, if you may, sir.
Finding substitute teachers is it's a challenge. It's a challenge that we're experiencing in the district for a variety of reasons. Number one, the economy is doing well. And with that, it's a challenge to find individuals to come in at $67 a day that we're offering. Number two, when we get a really good substitute teacher, it is a gem. So that person quickly finds out that there's opportunities to grow in the district. So that person is offered a paraprofessional position. And sometimes if we have a very, like yourself, if we have someone who's skilled, someone who has good people skills, someone who's with the kids and have some knowledge of the content, that person will find themselves in a long-term substitute position and not necessarily a substitute position where you're getting called in. The substitutes that we have, it's a challenge to fill Monday and Fridays, particularly in days like today. It's a good day out there, and you know, if you have a choice to fill a substitute position in a good day, some of our subs opt not to come in. Nothing negative about that. The other thing about substitute teachers is that they're pretty particular about where they work, and they can be because there's so many openings. For example, our elementary schools are very attractive for our substitute teachers. When you're asking a substitute teacher to come in and to teach or cover AP Calculus, that's a challenge, and that's high school. And so you're sitting in front of kids who have more knowledge about AP Calculus than you do. And for those substitute teachers who have been in that position, and I feel your pain. I don't know too much about AP Calculus right now as a grown adult. Maybe when I took it, but not right now. So this is always a challenge for us substitute teachers. We've tried to be very creative in a way where we've said to, at the high school level, we have opened up opportunities at the north and the south that we've hired or attempt to hire. I think we have, is it 3 out of the 4? So at both of our high schools, we have full-time substitute positions, meaning that if you sign up to be a full-time sub for 2 positions, come in every day. Don't call in or anything like that, just come in. Because at the high school level, we always need substitute teachers. So there are a total of 4 positions, 2 at the north and 2 at the south. and we've only so far been able to fill 3 of the 4 so far. It might have changed maybe a couple weeks ago or so, so that's a challenge. We've also have tried to tweak some of the incentives. Is that with the substitute teachers as well, Dan? Is that correct? I think we've,
Not in, well, we've discussed having the loyalty program, which we'll do next year, and
we tried to have we try to have like a loyalty program, and I'm, again, just thinking out loud here, try to say, so if you substitute teach 30 days straight, there's an incentive to, we'll consider making some adjustments to your pay. I mean, we've tried to do all we can, and the bottom line and this isn't to be negative or anything like that, but the substitute teacher can make more an hour working at some of our fast food establishments than they can in our schools. And that is a challenge. You asked about priorities. We could have said, increase the substitute teaching line items. That is, if someone from the outside said, that's where you should go, we get it. But in terms of our priorities, we wanted to keep the kids first. And so that is a challenge for us.
Follow up, yeah. And indulgence, Mr. Chair, it's not so much as a follow-up, but a statement to the doctor and everything. I have been in that advanced calculus situation, and it is challenging. But would I be correct to say, to be a substitute teacher, if there's some people in our community, because it is very rewarding, it's part of good community service. Everybody that comes into that type of environment is bringing some special skill. No matter what your station in life was, you bring it in, and you're with the kids, and it's very much rewarding. So basically, it's a background check and some interview, and then you could be sent right off, and in you go. And it isn't too much more than that, and you can have a lot of fun with the youth of our city. Am I correct?
Thank you. That's a very good point, and what a nice time to do some recruitment. So if you're out there and you'd like to be a substitute teacher and you're interested in that, and you have all disciplines, content knowledge is welcomed, and if you have an AP background in AP physics or science or anything like that, and you stick with us, I'd be more than happy to entertain any type of our incentive program to get that out there for you. And I think we have, some of our kids that come back from college would like to do some substitute teaching. Please come and see us. Please come down, fill out the paperwork, and we'll get all of the necessary paperwork loaded up for you to be a substitute teacher. It's a win-win for us. Also, some of our special education para positions have been a challenge to fill, particularly in our sub-separate classrooms. So again, anyone out there that wants to be a paraprofessional in our sub-separate special education classrooms, we'd be more than happy to have you come down and help you and help us as well with some of our kids in that particular positions.
All set.
All set, thank you.
Mr. Donovan, when we got full-day kindergarten, the governor was pretty much instrumental in bringing us. And they said the funding was going to go through Keno. Well, Keno has been doing gangbusters, especially in Nashua. And do we know when the first funding is going to come back from the state from the Keno? And how does that get applied to education?
I don't know. Is it when it's going to come? I mean, I haven't read anything on that lately. I was thinking at the end of this year. Is that right, Mr. O'Brien?
That's a very good question. I haven't poured over myself. Keno being relatively new, and I haven't seen when the actual disbursement is going to be. So can't say.
Yeah, so, but my sense is it would come in as a revenue source, just like adequacy aid and things like that. So it wouldn't hit this specific budget. It would come in and therefore reduce, as Alderman McCarthy spoke about before, it would affect the tax rate.
Just thinking out loud, because typically when money comes back to us like that, it comes from the state, goes to the city, and then the city gets to apply it. So I'm not sure if we've set up how that's going to function yet. I know that federal grants used to go through the state and they'd hold it for a while, and when I was on the airport authority, always felt that they were garnering interest on that money while they waited to give it to us. So right now, all that Keno funding's going in some pool up in Concord, and, you know, certainly not going to pay for the legislators.
Love my 100.
Yeah. So any other questions for the school district? Seeing none, you're not allowed question, no, go ahead.
This isn't a question, I was asked by Mr. Smith, our Plant Operations Director.
Yes.
Part of the whole budget process, when you look at your book, there's a thing called deferred maintenance. It's not in our budget, sort of, the mayor puts it in. We, for years, have hoped for $600,000 a year we haven't received $600,000 a year since I've been here, which has been 8 years now. We've received $200,000, a couple of years received $300,000, 1 year $100,000, and in this year's budget, fiscal year 19, it's only $100,000. In effect, with the security measures we've put in place, and we plan on spending, we'll probably use all of that for the security things. And that's even using the grant money from the state, the infrastructure fund. But we have to pay 20% of that, and the state's paying 80%. But that 20% is going to eat up that $100,000. So just as you go through your deliberations, if you can sort of look at that line, even another 100,000 would be great. Because 100,000, it's hard to get anything done with that
Talked
level.
to Mr. Smith about a couple alternatives that I think he's gonna pursue,
Okay.
but
Just
you're
thought
right.
I'd bring it up.
He can't do some of the things that need to be done with that 100,000, so the only way that would happen, if everything stayed status quo with this budget, is you'd have to take money from somewhere else in the school budget, which I don't think's gonna happen, so,
gonna be hard to
you
do
can't
that.
shut a school down because you can't hook up the power correctly or do the alarm system for the fire, system, so, but he's got a couple opportunities, I think, to come at it from a different approach, and I'm gonna be helping him there.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for coming in. Oh, yes,
I just
Mrs.
want to
Oden.
thank all of you. We're all residents of this city, and I think we all care about this reevaluation that could be coming. We're sensitive to that, but we wanted to let you know how strong our needs are. And we might have to make some tough decisions, but we recognize that in your position, you have to look at all the departments. We are one department, and we recognize that, and we will appreciate any help you can give us whatsoever to help our kids. So thank you all so much, and good luck to you in your job. Thank you.
okay. Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to make a motion to postpone R 18019, excuse me, until the next budget review committee.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Unfinished business ordinances,
There are none.
new business,
There is none.
general discussion. Seeing none, public comment, no. Remarks by Alderman McCarthy.
Yeah, I was gonna offer us, pay the $70 to watch Alderman O'Brien teach advanced calculus.
I'm in too.
May get more than that.
The $70 to see Alderman O'Brien teach AP calculus.
If I may.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Oh, I don't know what to say. We'll leave it at that.
Just remember, the mics are still on. So the 17th is, do you have something, Alderman Jettie?
Are we, remarks by Alderman? Are we there?
Yes.
I just wanted to remind people again that the Ward 5 Town Hall meeting is this coming Monday at 7 PM at the main Dunstable School.
Very good. Also, so the public hearing on the budget is the 17th. Typically, all the aldermen that can make it are there. The mayor will be on the stage. He'll give a presentation on the budget, and then we'll be running through each division and potentially each department. If there are questions, the division directors will be there to answer the questions. The length of the meeting is dependent on who shows up from the public. So, and then following that, we have a first wrap-up session, and that wrap-up session is when discussion motions can be made. At some point, we'll be taking a vote of this committee, and then we'll be sending the budget forward to the full board of aldermen. In which place other discussions can be held, but Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you. Can the chair inquire on every division that we have heard, where they are with the mayor's budget? Can we get an overview sheet of that so that we know exactly where they are and who is under, who's over, and everything else?
Oh, I can do that from a monetary standpoint, but I think we've heard from all the divisions as to, the majority of them are fine where they sit. So, we've had discussions with all the major departments. So,
What are you actually asking for?
Okay, what I'm saying, we did have a couple divisions that were under budget, that did come under, not a lot, but they did come under.
They're at the mayor's budget.
They're at the mayor's budget, and just kind of wondering what that particular, what they did propose. I mean, I think there was one that was under, and that's what
but the mayor's overall budget is
what we have to
Yeah,
deal with, and I
yeah.
concur, I do, but, yeah.
so. All right.
Oh.
I just wanted to follow on and say, I think I understand what you're asking for, and I would really appreciate that. I think he's just asking department by department, what's their increase, so we can look at it against what the mayor
Gets a
said.
little undaunting if you do it by department, but by division.
By division.
I can put together a number. Here's what they had in 2018. Here's what they asked for, and here's what the mayor gave them.
Yeah, that would be really helpful if you, I appreciate
Just a
that.
summary sheet. It's all in the book.
It's
but-
in the book.
The stuff
That's-
we're looking at on page 18, pretty much, other than not having the percentages listed as a column, has the change in budget for every department.
That's why I said it wasn't gonna be very difficult to come up with. Oh, yes, follow up, Alderwoman Kelly?
Yeah, but some of those did not come in at that, and unless we go back to those meetings, correct, then we won't know. It's not in this book,
Yeah,
correct?
and, right, and by the way, all of the minutes from all of the budget meetings are online.
I'm not following what departments didn't come in. I mean, the budget that's in here is what's proposed, and everybody that came in used the numbers that were in there with the only places where there were a couple of things that were adjusted at some point between the submissions, but I don't think there's any discrepancy between what any of the departments told us and what's
The
in
dollar
mayor's
stayed
budget.
the same. I think there was some corrections in a couple line items, though.
Yeah, I remember specifically, I asked about one, I believe it was the police, where it was about $300,000 that was different, so.
Right.
I just want to make sure we're looking at the right numbers when we start
Alderman
deliberating.
So are you saying that in the budget book, there's the department request and then mayor proposed? So the department requests, are those all the same? There have been no changes in that? I thought there were.
No.
No?
There are
Well,
places where the mayor did not fund everything the department requested,
Right.
but I think we had those discrepancies explained as to what the effect of that was.
the only one to be concerned about is each division at the bottom line has what they got in 2018, what they've spent as of February, which doesn't mean much, and then what what they requested from the mayor and what the mayor gave them.
Yeah, so I'm just trying to, asking for confirmation that what they requested, as shown in this budget book, has remained the same. That hasn't changed, you're saying?
Yes, nothing would change unless this committee voted to change it.
Well, unless they change their request.
Not once
But
they
they
give
have-
it to us, they can't.
They can't?
Nope.
Okay.
Anything else?
I have something.
Yes.
I just want to say that I'm one of those substitute teachers as well, since 2008.
Advanced calculus?
And you
really-
teach calculus?
I do K through 12. If I know what class it is, then I'll bring out my books so that I go prepared. But it really is rewarding, and I would recommend, I mean, you don't have to do it every week or once a month. They'll take whatever you can do, but I think that everybody should have that opportunity to sub. So that's a challenge to the board here as well.
If I may.
Alderman O'Brien?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I concur. My experiences with the kids, rewarding, and I'll tell you just how much is when you're in the parking lot, you're going to the market, and the kids that I had taught at the time when they come up to you, and it's been
Yeah.
years.
Yeah.
And you evidently made an impression is a reward that you just can't get. I mean, I pull people out of fires, but to have a kid come up to me in the parking lot and thank me for, being in, something with their life, it's
It
very
is.
much rewarding, yes.
Any other aldermanic comments? Seeing none, we have no need for non-public. Alderman Wilshire,
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
motion on the floor is to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. We're adjourned at 8:33.